Before we get started, a quick note today. This episode isn't about which faith is better or right. It's simply about our faith stories, where we've been and what we've learned, and how our journeys have shaped who we are. We hope it encourages you to reflect on your own story wherever you are on your path. Welcome to Nashville and Beyond.
I'm Brian Copeland.
And I'm Zach Copeland.
And we're a father-son duo helping people buy, sell, and thrive in Middle Tennessee.
But this isn't just about business. It's also about our family and our community.
It's a front row seat to how we live, work, and serve right here in Music City.
So buckle up as we explore
Nashville and Beyond. Do you know my go-to karaoke song is Faith by George Michael?
No, is it really?
Yes, I remember.
I love George Michael's, actually.
I remember hearing it when I was like in 8th or 9th grade and thinking that it was a song about like God and faith and everything. Yeah. And back then I didn't really listen to the words. It was more about the beat. And then I got into the words of it. It was like, I guess it would be nice if I could touch your body. You know what I mean? Like 8th or 9th grade. So every time I hear the word faith, I think of George Michael. And
he's a pretty good looking dude too, or was at that point. One of the favorite things that I see at karaoke is when people do "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me," and they change some of the lyrics around and make it very funny.
What a horrible way to start the faith episode.
I know.
It's just the opposite of what we're talking about today.
Right.
But, you know, faith means a lot of different things for different people. Some people use the word spirituality. There's just different faith for everybody. So
yeah, that's actually a question that I ask when I'm talking to someone romantically or trying to date them, and I'll ask, are you religious? Are you spiritual? Because those two things mean a lot of different things for people.
And I didn't know that growing up. I thought that faith was literally Christianity and only Christianity because of how I was raised. Yeah. You know, because I was raised going to these, if you play a song backwards with a record player, it says it's fun to smoke marijuana, or it has a sexual message from AC/DC in it, or Alice Cooper. You know, so I really just thought it was Christian oriented. And when I learned that there was Catholicism and that there was Judaism and there was Muslim. I don't know what you call it. Islam. Yeah, it's not Islam. Isms. Sorry, I always think there's an ism on everything.
No, it's fine. Yeah. You know, when I was in high school, the Monster energy drinks got really, really popular, and of course, all the Southern Christian Pentecostal women would go around to these trade shows with a can of Monster and would start to try to decode what the symbolism on it meant, because the O in the name Monster on the can has a cross in it. And so they would say that this is some kind of antichrist drink. And then the logo for Monster, the M, like the green M that everybody knows, they tried to, really pull and reach deep that it was the number 666 if you translated that shape into Hebrew. So it was kind of strange.
Isn't it crazy, though, that we both have these crazy stories from our childhood, yet when we became adults, we chose faith?
Yeah, we did.
You know, and so I think about, today's conversation is going to be super special because we're going to be talking about faith.
Yeah.
And one that hits very close to home with us.
Yeah, we're talking to my other dad, your husband, our pastor, Greg. He's not only family, but like I said, he's also our pastor. So before we get into that, let's start with how faith showed up for each of us growing up. I would love to know what your upbringing in the faith world was like, and our listeners, I'm sure, would love to know this as well.
Well, I was raised in Greenway Independent Premillennial Fundamental Missionary Baptist Church, and that was on the sign, and I need to take a drink after that because
that's a long word.
Yeah, so before that, we went to another church that was where my dad grew up. So my family was a Southern gospel singing group. So every night I was in church. We usually had revivals on Mondays and Tuesday nights, probably 26 weeks of the year. On Monday and Tuesday nights, and Wednesday night was Bible study. Thursday and Friday nights, or Thursday night was usually a revival. Friday and Saturday nights was what we called sing-ins in East Tennessee, or sing-ins. And you just have people go sing at all these groups. And then, of course, Sunday at our church, I had to be at church. My dad was the one that opened it. We were there. That's why I'm early to everything in life.
Yeah.
We call it the Copeland syndrome because we're all early. Because Dad had to open that church. Then we had Sunday school. Then we had the actual worship then we had something after church, then we had Sunday night also.
Yeah.
So my faith background was really routined. I didn't get to play sports, as if I would anyway. I did go to a knitting club, I should say, probably. I didn't do that because we always had something. I remember missing a big party that was at Big Ed's Pizza because we had a singing that night, and they didn't tell me about it. So, I can't say my history with faith has always been a healthy one. And we'll talk a little bit later about the evolution of how my faith became more healthy, because I can say truly after 18 to 24, I just wasn't there.
Yeah. I grew up in the Assemblies of God church. The first church that I went to was Prayer and Praise Fellowship Assembly of God Church. So it was another long name church, and it was in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And Pastor Walls was the minister, and then First Lady Walls. And I remember in that church was the first time that I had ever had a talking to by a preacher. And it was because I had started getting into Pokemon, because Pokemon became really big when I was a kid. So I started to get into Pokemon, and I wanted to watch Pokemon. And so my mother had arranged a meeting for me and the pastor, and he brought me into his office and told me, he asked me, "Do you know what Pokemon really means?" And I was like, "No, it seems like a kid's show to me. It's just a fun kid's show." He's like, "It means monsters in your pocket. And it is demonic, and it is of the devil, and it's not something that you need to be doing or involved with." And so, then I transitioned into being gay, so joke's on him. I remember my first experience, my first near-death experience was in that church during...
when you were playing Satan in the Halloween episode?
No, not that one. No, I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and it was like VBS time. And I had this hard candy, and I was sucking on it, and I swallowed it, and it got stuck in my throat.
Oh, great.
And so I started to choke and went over to the water fountain and couldn't get the water down. And so my mother ran over and gave me the Heimlich maneuver, and it was terrifying. I remember vividly that feeling. But the church of the Assemblies of God that I grew up in, I don't want to speak negatively on that church.
Of course not, no.
But it definitely shaped my systems of belief and the way that I viewed my relationship with God for a long time. And then even through college, I still went to an Assemblies of God church a little bit. Most of the time I spent was at Trinity Full Gospel Church of God in Christ, which was a black church, which I love. I love a black church. That's where I learned to play the Hammond B3 organ. And really enjoyed that time a lot. So,
yeah, I think when we look at how faith as kids and adults has shaped us to who we are. You talk about Vacation Bible School. There's certain smells and tastes that go with that. We would always have like true Kool-Aid that we poured all the sugar in that wasn't pre-mixed. I mean, you made the sugar and everything there. With those grasshopper cookies, which were chocolate cookies with mint filling. They were like an Oreo. Okay. So that's one of those smells and tastes I have associated with Vacation Bible School. I can still recite the Christian flag pledge, the pledge to the Bible, and the Pledge of Allegiance, because they always went hand in hand. And as a kid, church was such, I remember everybody smoked on the front porch of the church.
Wow.
And the preachers would go after, how was sermon and everything, and then we'd go play in the smog that back then they didn't regulate the tailpipes on a car, the exhaust systems. Yeah. And so there'd be all this exhaust because it'd be cold outside, and we go running through the fog of that in church. And all these memories, we used real Easter eggs, and they would stink by the time we got out at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, rotting. We'll talk about that in our Easter episode, which will be in several months from now. But yeah, it really shaped me as a child to be the servant's heart, to constantly be thinking about what others need in life. And while during my early 20s, I really didn't. I was always a person of faith, but I just wasn't where I needed to be. It took me coming into adulthood to find out all the things that happened wrong. And again, like you, not bashing a past, but just some of the things that I was taught incorrectly about being a person of faith, and a Christian specifically for me, to say, well, this is what being a Christian really is and how we walk and talk that. Yeah,
a good memory that I have of church growing up is that was where I learned to love music and praise and worship music. I started playing piano when I was 4, and by the time I was 12, I was playing on stage at church, and did that for my entire time in my teens, I was the church piano player. I would do specials. That's where I really started to develop my love for being on stage and leading on stage and being in the choir and singing. So that's definitely something that has shaped, obviously, who I am today, because it's still something I do today. So I'm very thankful for that. It definitely challenged me to learn to listen to other musicians at a very young age and other singers at a very young age, and to lead others at a very young age, because when you're the piano player in a church, you have a pretty important role.
Yeah.
Even if you're not leading worship, you're still kind of the basis for what everything else comes on. And the altar calls, as we would call them,
yeah.
where and still to this day, Dad calls me up for the altar calls to go and play, and that's something that I've done since I was 12 years old. I've never had a chance to go down to the altar myself because I always come up and play.
Well, speaking of altar, I shared this story with you last week driving down the road. There was a song that they sang in my church growing up, and it was like, so I'll role play it. So, because I know a lot of y'all, especially our friends who go to the school nearby their kids go to, they listen to this a lot. And we would start, and someone would get on stage and say, "Oh, brother Zachary, are you here to answer your call?" And then you'd have to stand up and say, "Yes, I'm here to answer my call." And then you would join the first singer on stage. And then the two of you would say, "Oh, brother David, are you here to answer your call?" And so they go through the whole church, but they would leave those who were sinners out. So they would still be sitting in the audience because it was altar call time at that point. Because, there would sit, Sister Wilma. And Sister Wilma, she was not a good lady. And so she needed Jesus.
Yeah.
And so she'd have to sit there and say, oh, Sister Sinner, you ain't here to answer your call. You can't go to heaven because you didn't answer your call.
Yeah.
So, those were the things that as a child that shaped. You and I were very music oriented, but, Greg is very sermon oriented.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we wanted to bring in somebody today who's been walking this faith journey right alongside with us. We mentioned him earlier. It's my other dad. It's your husband. He's our pastor. It is Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hello.
You will. It's so nice to have you here because, we've talked about you in a lot of episodes. I know you probably choose not to listen, so you don't.
I don't listen.
Thank you for that great plug and 5-star rating. But today we'll actually get to hear from you. And so, thanks for being here today.
Thank you,
You're
Dad.
welcome.
I call him Paul.
Yeah. So let's start here at the beginning. How did ministry begin for you?
Ministry began for me in Oak Ridge United Methodist Church as part of course, the United Methodist Church, but as holiness tradition.
In Alabama.
In a little bitty community called Oak Ridge. It was everybody in the building was related to me in some way, other than the pastor who was sent by the bishop. And I remember being a youth leader. I remember being the chair of the district committee for youth. I remember all of that stuff. And I remember Pastor Gilliam being sent. He was 75 years old. And in the holiness tradition, if you see the Holy Spirit on somebody, at least at that point, you acknowledge that they had some kind of a call. And he said, you are called to be a minister, but the bishop will never ordain you. And I remember that, and I was like, well, I'll stop.
How old were you at that point?
I was 19.
Okay, so we had this talk there at dinner. Greg never had to come out to anyone because
he was always a sissy.
Everyone was always blessed. His heart, he's okay. His mom, he never had to come out to anybody.
I may be, but I could also win the fight anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was the point of that story, was that the bishop knew and recognized that, and back then they wouldn't have ordained.
Correct. They would not have ordained.
Right.
And so, so I was like, well, okay, I'll stop. And then I ended up getting a job in Huntsville, moved there, and couldn't find a Methodist church. And so I ended up pulling right up to MCC Nashville, MCC Huntsville.
Which is Metropolitan
Community Church of Huntsville. And I was the first person to ever just pull up for the first time directly to the front door.
I don't know what that means.
It means most people drove around hiding because they were afraid that people would find out they were gay. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know to be afraid. So I just pulled up, and I was there for several months, and we had in many churches it would be called a revival, but it was called a spiritual renewal and church anniversary. And so I ended up being talked to by my longtime advocate and mentor, Jay Neely, at that point.
So you were in Alabama for that time, and then you came to Tennessee. So how did you get to Tennessee? Where did you go in Tennessee first?
So I came to Tennessee because I took a job and a church in Memphis, Safe Harbor Church, and I went there to lead that congregation. I was asked by the bishop to go there, and it was 4 people when I got there, and by the time I left, it was around 56. Had grown and had changed ministries and a bunch of other stuff. And I was there for 3 years. And then I got a phone call to consider coming to Nashville. And I came to Metropolitan Community Church of Nashville in September of 1998. And when I got here, the building was leaning and the floor bounced and there were 15 people. And so I came and we started working, and we did a lot. We helped with the Nashville Pride Spirituality. We did a lot of different things. And so my journey that's how I got to Nashville.
Awesome. So, you've always been a pastor of affirming churches, right? Is that correct?
I've never pastored a non-affirming church.
So what does affirming mean to you, both personally and spiritually?
Affirming to me, personally and spiritually, means that I am supposed to love whoever is put in my path, no matter who they are, no matter what they believe, and no matter who they love. And I really do welcome everybody into my presence. And I believe that's what the church is supposed to be and do. But most churches don't actually do that. They will say they accept you. And so there's this tacit, you're accepted, but you aren't who we want you to be.
Yeah, the way that I've always...
I want them to be fully who they are without them having to change core pieces of who they are.
The way that I've always described it is there's affirming and there's tolerant. And a lot of churches that call themselves affirming are just simply tolerant. You can't lead, you can't serve. But how do you think this calling that you have on your life to work in the affirming community has kind of challenged you or strengthened you?
I think it's strengthened me because when you live in a world where everything seems to be against everybody, you have to develop strength. You have to develop spiritual strength, mental strength, moral strength, emotional strength to be able to overcome it. I don't think that it has weakened me. In fact, I think it has made me more effective. And I believe that God does not work through necessarily our... we think of ministries as powerful because they're very large, but oftentimes... it's like the public pool. All of the noise comes from the shallow end, but the goodness comes from the deep end.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah,
it's a new one for me. So, of pools in community, what have you learned about?
I don't swim.
What have you learned about God and love in community through the years?
What I've learned is that I'm going to step back and start with. Most people who claim to be Christian in the United States are more American than they are Christian. Because we tend to think of Christian values as being what American values are. But if you read the scripture, it challenges you to think different. So my thing is I would rather be a better follower of Jesus than a better American. And that's the way I've lived in my life. That doesn't mean I don't love America. It means that I have to encompass faith in some way that gives everybody an ability to know who they are and all that they have and all they can encompass, and that too often we think of power as being power over rather than overcoming.
And it's wonderful that you bring that up, because right now we're in a very polarized society, and faith has become political for a lot of people. But I was telling you the other day, I was listening to Charles Stanley at the gym, who was known as a very, very, very what today people would back then would consider a very conservative Baptist minister, and what he was preaching was very much so what you said just now. But it's amazing what's happened over the past 20 years, how faith has kind of taken a turn here in that world.
Absolutely. You get to choose. Are you formed by faith? Are you formed by the culture? And you can tell how a person is formed by the language they use. You are not, you always, that's a tale. So if they are saying liberal versus conservative, that's a political formation. Whereas orthodox versus unorthodox, or this is what Jesus would do, is more of a faith-based thing.
So we've talked a lot about your past and what it means to you to be an affirming pastor, but part of the dynamic of our family is that faith is so intertwined into who we are as a family. We've got the pastor, the first lady, and the worship pastor here in the studio today.
And we're missing the drummer.
We're missing the drummer
and the choir member. Yeah.
And the choir member.
Yeah.
So how has ministry influenced your approach to family?
And vice versa.
How's family?
I think, I'm going to go back to something that happened long before I knew either one of you. My brother Anthony was getting married, and my first husband went with me to his wedding. And we were walking in the door, and he said, "Are they going to think I'm gay?" And I said, "You're with me. They're going to assume you're gay." And he ran and hid, and my Aunt Grace went to find him, and she told him, "This is family. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. As long as you're part of the family, you're part of the family." And so for me, it really is about, if you're part of the faith, if you're part of the church community, if you're part of, everything is about including everybody and helping them become all they're supposed to be, rather than focusing only on the things we think of as negative. So too often, we're too busy trying to point out other people's faults to work on our own. And so for me, family and faith are really intertwined, especially after I just read the gospel in a sermon a couple of weeks ago, where Jesus says, "Who are my brothers and sisters, and who's my mother, other than those who do the will of God?" And so for me, it really is about, how do you build a deeper understanding, and how does it flow through everything without being kitschy or caricatured, because I'm not a person who's going to force everybody to pray for every meal. Thanksgiving and acceptance and growth and prayers are something you live. They're not something you just say.
Yeah. So how has being a pastor and a dad in the same household affected the way that you parent?
There's a lot of sermons.
There's a lot of sermons.
Esther, get to the altar now before.
Most pastors would say, "Well, spare the rod and spoil the child," or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that it's helped me be able to be a better father, because it reminds me that none of us are perfect, and we need to be able to accept people. Now, it doesn't mean that, because I think a lot of times we talk about accountability, but I think most people do not need an accountant. They need an editor, because most people are born good. I would say all people are born good. They get bad influences, but they just need somebody to believe in them and challenge them. and to become everything they're supposed to be. Like this week, I could fuss about somebody leaving their clothes laying around, or I can talk about, oh yeah, you got an 85 average in math, and you've struggled
I thought you were
with
talking
math.
about me until that very math moment. I was like, I left my clothes laying around. Okay.
Well, I pick
Esther
them up.
did good in math. She's got a good math score right
She
now.
does
We're proud
have
of her.
it's her highest score, and I'm very proud of her for
Yeah.
that, because it has been a struggle this year for her. But how do you encourage? That doesn't mean that there's never a day where you say, hey, you did this wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's never a day, or that there's never a day that there's not some kind of punishment. But I remind people constantly, discipline is what prevents punishment. And discipline is usually something we do for ourselves. And that's why I tell the kids, if you keep your room picked up, if you keep your homework done up, if you do all of this stuff, if you're keeping the discipline of life, or the discipline of faith and the discipline of presence, what ends up happening is you raise in your abilities. But if you don't keep the discipline, you end up faltering.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into that, because it's about this whole idea of when faith and family collide. And I want you to think about some examples of when faith and family have collided for you. And I specifically think about a morning I woke up and walked out, and Alabama had just lost the national championship the night before, and you had to break that news to Micah. Can you talk a little bit about that and how faith
I
kind of
don't
influenced
remember
that?
that moment, but
Well, then we can't tell the story, but I'll tell the story. What happened was I woke up and you were dreading telling Micah that Alabama lost the national championship that night before. And I remember opening the door and he was in tears. Because he was probably 6 or 7 at that point.
yeah, he was young.
And you said you were given this whole piece about philosophy and about how that, we're here for the bigger picture of things, and how that this moment wasn't a great moment, but there will be so many more moments. And you took a very big faith approach for him on that. You probably don't remember because it's how you live your life in our family, but it was a big moment in our history where I remember you really bringing faith and family colliding. Are there other moments that you think about with faith and family colliding, whether it be a conversation?
Mike, for me, the times that Micah has helped with food pantry and the kids have helped with food pantry, the times where they've played with the kids that came for food and stuff, where they just sort of let themselves down. One of the funniest ones was when I got a phone call from one of the teachers at their school,
Okay.
because Micah corrected them during their Bible lesson.
I don't know this story now.
Corrected them during their Bible lesson. And so my first question to the teacher was Micah disrespectful? And she said, no, he wasn't disrespectful. And then my second question was, were you wrong? Not was Micah wrong, but were you wrong? And she was like, well, the story. And so I had to talk to Micah about the fact that not everybody lives in a household where the Bible is discussed. It's considered in almost everything we do. There's always, like if the kids don't want to do their chores, I say, he who worketh not, eateth not.
No.
And all of that stuff. I said, everybody doesn't do that, Micah. And you need to understand, she's trying to meet the students where they are. I said, so you don't need to correct. You just need to be able to say, okay, is the core truth there? And so he dealt with that, and he worked, and he's all 3 of our kids ended out to be justice warriors.
Yeah.
And justice warrior is exactly what faith is about being just.
And sometimes it's polarizing, because the kids can be ostracized for that, and
Absolutely.
especially Esther, because she's our big social justice warrior.
She's the biggest social justice
Well, speaking
warrior.
of Bible verses, there are 2 Bible verses that you have brought into my life that are just perfect to me. And one of them is really funny, and then one of them's a bit more serious. My favorite one is that whenever I started hanging around and getting into fitness, you would always tell me, I think it's Psalms 28. Only a wicked man runs when
Oh,
no
no,
one is
no,
chasing
it's
him.
in Proverbs.
28. Proverbs 28.
Only the wicked run
Only the
when
wicked
no one
run
chases.
when no one's chasing them. And he said, that's why I don't do cardio, because I'm not wicked. So there's no reason for me to be running. And then the other verse that you have shared with me that has really impacted me more than I think you realize is, this was when I was living next door to the church, where the church is now. And we had demolished the house that's standing where the church now stands. And there was just a flat piece of land. And because I lived on the parcel of land right next door, you would come over all the time, and we would just kind of walk the property and hang out and talk about the church and the church building. And you shared with me, despise not the days of small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices that the work has begun. And that verse has stuck with me, and it's so impactful to me, and I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, because it does mean a lot to me. Because, when we think about the small steps that we have to take to make big changes in our lives, sometimes we can get saddened or disappointed that the steps are so small. But the Lord rejoices because we are actually starting the work, and that's what's most important.
That is absolutely true. And by the way, for those listening, that is from the prophet Zechariah.
Yeah, it is. It is. So let's talk now about our church home that we have, Covenant of the Cross. We built this church. It came out of the ground last year. Was the first service that we had there at that church. It was a long and complicated and emotional building process.
In the new building.
That we have.
Because Covenant's like, how many years old? 20?
No, it's 20.
It's
started
over 20
in 2002.
Years old. So it'd be 23 years old.
23 years old.
So, but we're also the third church in America, the third affirming church in America.
To build from scratch.
Its own building from the scratch, from the ground up. So talk to us a little bit about what you hope people feel when they walk into Covenant of the Cross for the first time.
So the first thing I want them to feel, and it's what I pray over the chairs and the doors every Sunday, is that they would feel a warmth of the presence of God, and a warmth of welcome, and that they would find a community that is not always exactly like them, but is willing to let them be them and become everything that they're supposed to be, and that they would find people they can depend on. Because we can say we depend on God only all day long, but God works through fallible, broken human beings. And how do we let that happen?
Well, I think about some of the people who've come, because we always think that when someone walks through the church that they perhaps are not, someone said the word saved triggers them the other day. Yeah. Saved, we always just look at it that way. But we've had people come through the church doors who are truly, they at one point were in faith and they became atheists, or they were agnostic.
Absolutely.
We've had people who were Wiccan, who were on the earth arts. How do you welcome everyone, knowing that at the base of the ministry you have, it is a Christian-based church? How do you welcome in someone who is completely opposite of what you are and we are?
So one of the things that I learned early on, it was when I was still in Huntsville. I was part of a clergy group that were affirming pastors and priests and all of that. And it was not just Christians, it was other people. And being able to sit down with leadership from other faith traditions causes you to be able to hear people for where they're at, not where you wish they were. And a lot of times what people do, that pastor who's preaching a revival and spitting on the first 3 rows while he's yelling, is
calling it Holy Ghost rain.
Is what he's ending up doing is he's not meeting people where they're at. And you can't help people become a follower of Jesus if you don't know where they're at to begin with. And sometimes that just takes time. But the other piece of that equation is, if you have to force a change immediately, other than in abusive situations, like if somebody's abusing somebody else, if you have to force a change, you're saying you don't trust the Holy Spirit and God to do their work. It's not my job to make them believers. It's my job to love them not to scare the hell out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And what passes for Christianity in America now tends to be far more about fear of the other and the difference. And if it doesn't fit what I want right now, it's obviously of the devil. Well, I mean, we found out that, AC/DC played backwards doesn't really talk about sex, and we've found out. So we think of conspiracy theories now, but they've existed ever since humans existed. And so our task then is to just love people, and when they say something, care for them and say, I don't agree with that, but I love you and I welcome you.
That's what I love about you, especially, is you know where your values stand. You're not going to change who you are just to appease the person in front of you. Mm-hmm. And there's in this affirming thing, there's always this thing of, we love you in spite of everything. Mm-hmm. That's not what you said at all. It's I love you, and it's that center. So when you think about the affirming future, what do you think the affirming communities look like in the future?
One of the things that I think we've done is affirming communities have believed for too long that they are going to preach themselves or work themselves out of existence, or that they have to do it online because people are afraid. And one of my things is that I think that the future of the affirming movement, and especially of affirming Christianity, is the building of deep relationships in unique locations that you can't get from watching online. I mean, there's a difference between being in a room with somebody, and if you can't be in the room, because at the end of the day, Jesus is only present where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name. Well, that means I have to be with people. I can't watch it online. Mm-hmm. And being present with each other means that, if I had a rough day today and you had a good day, you can cheer me up. Or if I need help with something that I can't handle myself, Zach can help me with it. But too often we think we have to do it on our own, and that is an American value, mm-hmm. not a Christian value, and it actually leads to a lot of false teaching about what faith is.
I want to go into a really personal, deep story here on this, before we go into the break. And this is, you talked a lot about people coming to our church and us being who we are, but how about us entering other people's worlds and still being able to function? And we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast who go to they have children at the same school that we have children at. And our children one of our children goes to a school that is not in our faith tradition at all. The tradition doesn't see eye to eye with us at all on some issues. Mm-hmm. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because it's very personal. And I know listeners are probably who know us and who listen to this want to know how we function in that world. And what's been your philosophy on that?
My philosophy is I'm supposed to act. It's very preacherly. I'm supposed to act like Jesus at all times. And that means that I welcome whoever I am around. I don't just go to the people that I'm comfortable with. I go, and that's not just at the school, that's in any place. But my philosophy has been, I serve. My goal, my job, the only thing that changes people's lives is that they see you serving and loving people for who they are without needing to change them, because it's God's job to change.
And I think that's what we've seen a lot at the school from, again, the totally different faith tradition that I wasn't even raised in and knew nothing about. But the love we see there, and we see so many polarizing moments on television or on social media that say this is what a person of faith is, and so we can't like that person, yet we don't see eye to eye with the people we intersect with every day but we have so much in common that love is there. And we're treated with such amazing dignity, respect, and love beyond belief there. And while, our kids may not agree always in Bible class, and they learn to go through those pieces, when we said we wanted our kids to go here, it was about a strong education, and it was about the love. And we knew that we're not there to change any person's mentality or opinion on faith or of affirmation or any of those things. But in that process, we found a very big mutual love in that very personal place.
Absolutely.
So
they've been very, very, I remember that first time that we visited to talk to them, and it was a very wonderful meeting.
Yeah. So, we'll take a break right now. But when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more to Greg about what faith looks like today and how it's evolved since the early days in America. We'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, so we're back with Dad. And Dad, I want to ask you how faith changes as life changes. Faith is not something that stays the same. I think it grows and it shifts and it adapts. It evolves based on who you are and who you're around. So what does faith mean to you now at this point in your life versus what it meant to you when you were in the beginning of your faith journey?
So faith matures and changes. One of the things that I think we haven't taught people well about is the fact that we should keep the joy of our initial salvation and that initial relationship with God. And we should continue that romance, if you would. But one of the things that we don't think about is how do we help people mature into the fullness of what God wants? And for me, I've always been really focused on how does the way that I move through the world reflect the values of Jesus, and what do I need to remove from my world or my behavior that doesn't reflect that value? And I think a lot of people don't have any mirrors or anybody who can help mentor them. Mm-hmm. And when they do find people that they think can mentor them, they're finding people that think like them already rather than people who challenge them to think differently. And if you can't be around people, if you can't be challenged to think differently, I don't know that you can mature and become everything you're supposed to be. So you can still be 60 and be a 6-year-old Christian.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot because people think that Jesus came for them and them only.
And not for us.
Not for us. And for me, salvation is not just personal. It is corporate as well.
Yeah. I think my faith beginning was, there was obviously a lot of negative ideas that were put into my head about certain people and certain groups of the world. Mm-hmm. And our community, the queer community, included among those. And one of the most beautiful things that's happened over the last 2 or 3 chapters of my life have been all of the bad theology that my head was filled up with. You have really helped me to pull that out and to unlearn a lot of that and to replace it with good theology that is truly Christ-centered and is about how do we build community, how do we serve Christ, how do we love each other, how do we treat people with dignity and respect regardless of what we think about them. I think it's made me a better worship leader because I'm able to recognize that, because let me take a step back. On stage when you're leading worship, one of the hardest things to do is to look out into a congregation and get zero feedback from them, to get zero energy from them, to feel like you're putting out so much energy, that the team on stage is putting out so much energy, and there's just a wall between the stage and the audience. And what I've had to learn is that I don't know what they dealt with on the way into church this morning. I don't know what they dealt with this whole week. I don't know what's going on in their lives that may be really depressing them and bringing them down. All I can do in this moment is mirror or I guess show what it looks like to just worship and not focus on the things that would distract or detract from the moment and the purpose of the moment, which is just having a connection with Christ and with the body around you at that time. So, Pop, what about you? How was your faith changed from when you were a child and growing up into where you're at now?
Yeah, so I hinted at this a little bit in our first 10 minutes. When I was really, church jumped a lot after because I went from being in that this completely submersive faith backwoods tradition to college, and I went to a Christian college and was sang in the ambassador group there, then went into Christian music. And during that time, I just got really estranged from church. While I was still in faith communities, faith community isn't about the people you're surrounding yourself with. I mean, in those churches, it's about the relationship you have with your Creator. And I can't say I felt that relationship where it needed to be. I always said when I was little, I said, I would love to be married to a pastor one day, but all pastors are ugly. And so, when I got into the affirming ministry, and we'll talk about our relationship later, but when I got into the affirming ministry, it wasn't a light switch that turned on. It was a very, very slow boil that started at freezing cold water. And it took me the thaw first, and there was no hurry with Greg on that. Back to that philosophy of if an atheist or a Wiccan walks through our door, he's not going to put you in hot water immediately.
Yeah,
he's going to
proselytize
just, hey, you're here, and we're going to be together. And and so that's kind of reshaped me, because my assumption was you had to walk down the old time gospel aisle, lay on the mourner's bench, or they call it the mariner's bench. I didn't know it was a mourner's bench until later, because it was mariners, and I thought it was MARNING, NER, yeah. Mariner's bench, and say that you were a horrible sinner, and that you were, and then you magically got up and you were transformed in that 10-second time. And I'm again not what happens at that moment in your life, whatever your conversion looks like, it's what happens after in that growth. And I can't say I was really taught that growth or modeled that growth. My parents absolutely did. But with everyone else in my life, that wasn't modeled, because I see them get up from that mourner's bench and then the next day be the same person or worse than they were before, whether it be with gossip, whether it be with whatever it was. So being in a place where we accept that we sometimes mess up, but our goal is always to strive to be better. So I go back to the quote that Greg has said over and over and over again. This is not a microwave. It's a crock pot. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon. And I have been on this marathon now for 20, 25 years with my new faith walk. So, it certainly changed those assumptions for me. So let's talk a little bit about me and you, Greg, and how it brought us together in faith. So tell us a little bit about, your previous life before Brian with Ken, before he passed, and how we came together through that transition.
So I was married before, and his name was Ken. He was a sweet guy, very similar to you, very driven in that way too. But we moved to Nashville, and together, for me to take the church over on Ashland City Highway, and after we had been there for a few years, I was like, this just isn't working, and so we started Covenant of the Cross. And a year later, he died in a car wreck. And so I took 2 years of mourning and 6 months of wearing solid black for mourning. And then I started dating. And then you and I met in 2005. And you came to a play that I called the world's worst church play.
It was so bad.
People died in it. Anyway, and
So
Not literally.
well, yeah, well, we kind of did. It was that bad.
so anyway, but it was well intentioned, and you came because you were friends with the lead in it, and
He was fine in it. I know you're listening, Jeremy. You weren't that bad, but you know it was bad. You do know that. Okay.
Anyway, and I introduced it, and that's the first time you ever saw me, and you thought I was with somebody else,
Yep.
and he had to tell you that no, I wasn't, and then you begged for my phone number,
Yeah.
and then you begged him for my phone number, then you called me and
No,
said,
I told him because he said, no, I can't give you his number because he will kill me. I said,
And I called
so
you.
you give him.
and you
I
told
said,
me to
yeah.
come out, and I was like, no, I've got to preach in the morning.
Yep. And so I showed up at church the next day, and we've been together ever since. And a factoid, the podcast art you're looking at right now on your listening platform was photographed by that guy who introduced us,
Yep.
Jeremy Ryan.
Yep.
And you'll see new podcast art here soon, and he's photographing that for us too. Anyway, so yeah, we met at church. Faith brought us together because, as I said earlier, I always said I wanted to be with a pastor, but just didn't think it was possible. And so, us coming together, creating this faith community, we never dreamed our family would grow into I think if there was a reality TV show about gay faith-based families, we would probably be the
number
family
one
to,
spot.
to
Yeah.
do it. Netflix, HBO doing that kind of thing. We're kind of like the good version of the Mighty Gemstones.
The Mighty Gemstones, yeah.
People are like
The righteous
rhinestones.
gemstones. Yeah.
No righteous gemstones for me.
We should call it the righteous rhinestones. That's what we should be.
So, our whole family, talk a little bit about what's it feel like to have a family now? Because you were obviously Ken, y'all were a family, and obviously the passing of Ken, and we talk about that openly, and we recognize that. But what did you ever dream that your family would grow beyond you and your spouse having a ministry? And what does that look like for you now? Have a whole ministry family?
I actually did not. I figured that I would have a spouse, and then of course, Jerry called and said, "Hey, my niece is going to have a baby, and you need to adopt it," basically, right? And so we did, and that's how Micah came into our lives.
And we didn't know Mike would have music ability.
We didn't know Micah would have music ability.
And step back for a second, because Zach was talking about looking out in the audience and people not giving anything back. We're guaranteed every single Sunday that there will be one person who's giving everything back and singing at the top of their lungs, louder than anyone, and it will be Greg. No matter what mood he's in, no matter how bad of a week he's had, no matter if he's sick, if his sugar monitor is going off on his diabetic monitor, he is going to be singing exuberantly. And the joy of it is he is tone deaf.
And occasionally we catch it on hot mic, too.
We do. But God didn't say make a perfect noise. He said make a joyful noise. And there's no more joyful noise. So I think it's kind of funny that God blessed you with 4 musical family members.
he's making up for it, is what you're saying?
No, not at all. So you're talking about, so when Micah came along and, we didn't dream that he would be musical, but now he plays the drums at church.
Correct. He plays the drums at church. So for me, again, I think ministry is a collaborative effort. I do not ever think it is a one-person effort, because if it's a one-person effort, you don't need God. So for me, it really brings a lot of joy when we're together doing things like that together.
Well,
and it doesn't have to just be in worship. I mean, a lot of people think of church as worship. For me, it's food pantry. It's helping with providing health care. It's all of that kind of stuff.
Well, and talk about Esther before church. I mean, what is she doing before church? Like, she's there every Sunday morning at 9:30.
Esther's there sweeping the porch. Nobody asked her to do it. Nobody asked her to do it. She is there helping make coffee and making hot chocolate, talking to new kids and even new adults that come. And she really just loves to to do all of that.
Because all of us have been kind of stage people, and while she's an amazing singer, I mean, like when she's in choir practice, she's got that soprano voice going. I mean, she can flat out sing, but she is that behind the scenes, key person who's just constantly supporting your ministry below the radar, and she never really wants praise for it.
But that's true of her in general,
Yeah.
anyway. No matter, not just church. That's at home. That's at school. She doesn't want to be quote unquote the leader.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't like the spotlight.
And then, of course, Zach came about because, we've talked about this on podcasts before, but those who haven't listened to all the episodes, we were in a situation where we needed a temporary minister of music, called a friend of mine from the Christian music industry, who said, hey, there's this guy out there who has some opening right now. I just got off the road with another artist. And then talk about how you kind of formed your relationship with Zach and ultimately became a father figure to him, to be his father.
So, well, that is an interesting story because we knew things were going to be coming up pretty soon. I don't remember what it was. Well, it was right before COVID, and you didn't know how you were going to pay rent. And I said, well, we've got this house over here. Do you want to move into that? Do you remember that conversation?
I do, yeah.
It was on the back row in the old church building. And you were like, oh, okay, let me think about that for a minute. And that ended up happening. And I think the next week or the week after was when COVID hit and we had the lockdown.
Yep.
And then it was me and you and the sound tech in the building every Sunday. And we just got to spend time together, just the two of us. And we got to develop that relationship. Mind you, yelling across 95 feet in the auditorium. But so that nobody got sick. But we had I thought that was a very special time.
Yeah.
Because I got to know you and you got to know me in ways that we wouldn't have got to know each other any other way.
Yeah.
Well, talk about where you were, Zach, spiritually then, candidly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had just gotten off the road with a gospel artist, and I had, during that time when I had Sundays free, I would go and play at different churches around town where there were also, recording artists who were the worship leaders and worship pastors and pastors. And I was burnt out with church and with religion in general because, secret here to the gospel music industry. And I'm not, bashing the gospel music industry at all, but the people that you see on stage are not the people that we see on the bus. And that may come as a surprise to some people, but it's very easy to get up on stage and to sell the story of spirituality and religion and Christ-centeredness and Christ-focus to a room full of 3,000 people, and then get on the bus, and then things are not exactly that same story. So I kind of got bitter, honestly, to church and religion, and so then when we met, and I ended up being at Covenant, and I worked 2 Sundays during pre-lockdown, and then lockdown happened, and like you said, it was just you, me, and the sound tech. We got to spend a lot of time together learning about each other, and I was just shocked that a church like this existed. I had no idea that it existed. I would have been there earlier had I known. And so I think learning about how things operated, and then especially once lockdown restrictions and guidelines kind of softened and we were able to introduce more people back into the congregation and into the building and the sanctuary, and I started to see how everyone interacted with each other. And I started to see you come more alive as you were preaching to a room full of people and not just to a screen. That just opened my eyes up even more, and it became this really beautiful kind of spiritual journey for me that you play a pivotal role in, and we've talked about it a lot. But yeah, that's kind of what happened there to get us together. Yeah. And I continued to play at Covenant since then. I'm still there. And then eventually, we all became the family that we are today.
Yeah.
So
it's funny because, I thought this episode we'd go into a lot about like what the Nashville faith community looks like. And we're going to do another whole episode just on the Nashville faith community.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking saying, we haven't really talked about all the faith of Nashville.
Yeah.
So we may hit that another time. So, but for now, we're going to play a game with you today.
Oh,
that we play called the Nashville Rathers. Okay, so we're going to we have I think 3 or 4 for you today, and we're going to answer 2 with you. So I'll take the first one here. I'll take the first one. So Greg, would you rather have a church full of tradition or a church full of change?
Change.
Why?
Because tradition just means you keep doing it the same way that it's always done. But change means that people have changed. And for me, people changing is the entire goal. And if tradition helps that, fine. If tradition doesn't, throw it out. I remember moving into our first building for Covenant, and we had an altar and a pulpit, and people suddenly started using traditional music and traditional hymns that were hundreds of years of age. And I said, this isn't who we've been for the last year. Why are you doing this now? If it's because we're in this building, we need to throw everything in this building away.
Mm.
So then my question to you will be, would you rather have a sunrise prayer or a midnight reflection?
I would do sunrise prayer.
Okay, why?
One, because I'm usually up before it's up.
Yeah, true.
So when you're out letting chickens out and all that, you're already up. So, and I actually pray when I'm doing all of that stuff. So a sunrise prayer is about starting the day and all that. I do love a midnight reflection, but I think that's closing a day.
And I've got the final one, and this is going to be a hard one. Would you rather have a church full of singers or a church full of speakers?
I think I would rather have singers.
Well, good. Yay. Yay.
Yay. We're almost there.
Yeah.
But the reason is because oftentimes the people who can sing can also articulate and speak in a way that is different, that speak to different people. And yes, I believe that rhetoric changes people. And I think that sometimes rhetoric doesn't change people. And I think sometimes singing changes people. And sometimes singing doesn't change people. I think it depends on more than emotion. It depends on intention and deciding to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, y'all, that's all the time that we have today. We know this has been a longer episode than normal, but we're here with our dad, my dad, his husband.
I was like, wait.
And, it's important to have this time together as family. Dad, thank you so much for being here. Faith, it's one of those things that keeps evolving, but it's also what keeps us grounded. I have described you as the rock of our family and Poppy as the engine of our family, and you are very much the rock that keeps us grounded. And faith, and in so many other ways too. So thank you for always being that. We talked about faith. For me, faith has been about rediscovering how to have it after losing it.
And for me, it's about gratitude and knowing that love and faith don't have to be separate.
Yeah. And faith's not about perfection, as you say. It's about presence. It's one of the most important things.
And we'd love to hear from you and your faith stories. So share your favorite church story if you have some of those crazy stories that you heard at the beginning with us. And if you'd like to learn more about Greg's ministry, you can certainly visit covenantofthecross.com. You can visit on Facebook, Instagram, of course, Sundays at 11 a.m.
11 a.m.
The food pantry feeds hundreds of families each month. So if you're a family or you know of a family experiencing food insecurity throughout the Nashville area, reach out through Covenant of the Cross for that also. We'll put this in the show notes for you, the emails and everything you need, but continue to reach out and share with us. But for now, that's today's episode on faith with Covenant of the Cross and Nashville and Beyond. Thanks a lot.
We'll see you next time. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal, financial, or real estate advice. Listeners should always consult licensed professionals for guidance specific to their situation. Brian and Zach Copeland are licensed real estate agents with Compass 615-522-5100. Kevin Kinnerson, MLS number 171733 with Lemingham Mortgage, is the executive producer. Engineer Mike Reeves. Music Dusty Boots by Eco Leaks. Nashville and Beyond. Copyright 2025.